All right, we're going to finish up this chapter talking about our supporting connective tissues, and then we'll finish up the connective tissues with our fluid connective tissues. From there, we're going to move on to our third tissue type, which is muscle, and then our fourth tissue, which is nervous. And we'll finish off this chapter talking about how all of these tissues were formed. So the supporting connective tissues include our cartilage and our bone. Cartilage is a semi-solid connective tissue, so it has kind of a gelatinous structure, which makes cartilage a little bit easier on bending. It doesn't it won't snap. It's more able to bend a little, but cartilage doesn't have any vascularity, so it can't heal itself either. It needs to gain its nutrients from the environment around it, so the connective tissues that are touching it or the fluids that surround the connective tissues. Cartilage has a perichondrium, which is composed of dense irregular connective tissue that surrounds it in general, except for fibrocartilage, which has no perichondrium. Fibrocartilage is found in areas where we have a lot of fluid, either spinal fluid or we have serous fluid that's going to nourish the cartilage. So cartilage is a very strong connective tissue. It functions in structure in general, but it does have some flexibility compared to like bone. There are three types of cartilage. Hyaline cartilage, the most common type. Then we have fibrocartilage and elastic cartilage. Hyaline cartilage has a glassy appearance. It has, it's composed of these structures called chondrocytes. Chondrocytes sit in areas that we call wells. So we often look at these and think cells in a well. The wells are known as lacuna, where the chondrocytes sit inside. Chondrocytes that are young or new are called chondroblasts, and they produce the extracellular matrix, which is that gelatinous matrix. Then once they are surrounded by the matrix, they become mature chondrocytes and just maintain that matrix. We find the hyaline cartilage throughout the body. It's found at the ends of all of our long bones. It made up most of the fetal skeleton. It's found in areas like the nose, the trachea, the larynx. It always has a perichondrium, so it gets its nutrients from the dense irregular connective tissue surrounding it. Fibrocartilage, this is weight-bearing cartilage. It's very strong, has a lot of collagen fibers in it. So here you can see, again, the chondrocytes in the wells. Oftentimes when we see this, you can think of it as, or I think of it as like a belt of cartilage. So it's very beautiful in structure. And you can see each of the chondrocytes is surrounded, or it's found inside of a lacuna. It has no perichondrium, so it's going to gain all of its nutrients from the fluids around the cartilage itself. When we find fibrocartilage in the menisci of the knee, we find it in between our vertebrae, and it makes up the pubic symphysis. Then we have elastic cartilage. Elastic cartilage has a lot of elastic fibers that are found within the cartilage matrix. It's very elastic, or it has a lot of stretch and recoil, very springy. We find it in our ear. So like when you flip your ear forward, it's elastic cartilage that allows your ear to go back to its regular structure. It does have a perichondrium, so it gets its nutrients from the dense irregular connective tissue. You can tell elastic cartilage from the others. Hyaline has a very glassy appearance. Fibrocartilage almost looks like a belt of cartilage. And elastic cartilage kind of looks messy, if you ask me, with the elastic fibers running in multiple directions. So there you have the three different cartilages again. Bone is another supporting connective tissue. This is a solid has a solid matrix. It's highly vascular, and it also has a lot of nerves that run through it. So it's a good nervous innervation, and it has a lot of nutrients that always move in. This is called an osteon. So you can see the bone cell kind of looks like a tree as it grows outward. You get multiple rings, and you have this central region called the central canal, and then the rings form outwards. And so in one bone, we have multiple units called osteons. And within the osteon, we have tiny little osteocytes. So each of these little like specks, these are where the osteocytes sit. And kind of interesting, they all sit in little tiny spaces within the matrix called lacuna, just like your cartilage. Bone has a dense irregular connective tissue surrounding it called the periosteum. There are two types of bone: spongy bone, which is has a spongy appearance, and I'll show you what it looks like in class when we're in the skeletal system. This is spongy bone. It has red bone marrow coursing through it. Red bone marrow is the site where blood cell production occurs. And then we have compact bone. This is the one that you're going to have to know for the lab practical and stuff, and for the lab quiz. So this is the one. I don't typically make you know this one. Bones have a lot of functions. So structure, of course, they make your body structure. They support and protect internal organs. They're a site of storage. They also are where blood cell formation occurs. They provide attachment for muscles so that we can move the body. So they have a lot of functions. There's your bone, connective tissue. The last connective tissue then is fluid connective tissue. There are two types of fluid connective tissue. I only really talk about one in this semester, and that's blood. We'll talk about lymphatic connective tissue next semester in the lymphatic system. Blood is composed of blood cells, and you can see them here. There's all different types of blood cells. There's white blood cells. There are tiny little platelets, those little flecks, and then there's just hundreds and hundreds of red blood cells. The ground substance is called plasma, and it is fluid. It has dissolved proteins in it. And the major function of blood is to transport nutrients to the proper places and get rid of waste products, but it also protects the body because we have these white blood cells. Lymphocytes are examples of white blood cells that protect from specific invaders. Other white blood cells, like this neutrophil, function in protection of non-specific invaders. The location is all throughout the body, of course. I should say, in our blood vessels, so not all throughout the body, in our blood vessels, all throughout our body, in our blood vessels, okay? The next tissue type that we'll talk about then is muscle. There are three types of muscles. All muscles function to produce movement. That's their main job, is to move the body, or to, I won't say move the body, is to move stuff. Either move the body or move materials throughout the body. But while they do that, they have another I won't say less important, I'll say another function that occurs. They also help in maintaining body temperature. Skeletal muscle is muscle that is attached to our bones, and its structure is striated. It's a voluntary muscle. It's multinucleate, so these are the nuclei. These are striations running along, and its function is to move the body. So skeletal muscle attaches to our bones and allows us to move throughout, move our muscles, or move our bones around. So this is a voluntary organ, or a voluntary muscle, because we can choose to move our muscles if we want to. Cardiac muscle is also striated. You don't see the striations as good up here, but you can definitely see striations along here. Cardiac muscle is branched. So you can see the branching really well down here. You see some branching up here, but not as well. It has intercalated discs. So there's an intercalated disc. You can see the intercalated discs here as well. Intercalated discs connect one muscle fiber to another muscle fiber. Cardiac muscle can be singly nucleated, or can have up to two nuclei, whereas skeletal has multiple nuclei. It's a multinucleate muscle. Cardiac muscle is considered involuntary, because it does not, we do not have to think about having our heart beat. Our heart beats on its own all the time. So we don't have to have any nervous innervation to have our heart beat, but nervous innervation does control the heart rate in general. We don't need it, but we do have it. That makes sense. And then we have smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is single nucleated cells. The nuclei are very elongate. You can see them here. Each nucleus is associated with one single cell. There are no striations. They don't have all the same proteins as cardiac and skeletal muscle. Smooth muscle is also considered involuntary. We do not have to think about the muscles contracting and moving materials from our stomach to our intestines, through our intestines. We don't have to think about our ureters squeezing urine to our bladder. It just happens. So that's why it's considered involuntary. There are the three muscle types, locations. Cardiac muscle is found in the heart. That's it. Its major function is moving blood throughout the body. Skeletal muscle is attached to our bones. Its major job is to move the body itself. And then smooth muscle is located in the walls of most of our hollow organs, such as like our stomach, intestines, uterus, stuff like that, blood vessels. And it functions to move materials throughout our body. The last tissue then is nervous tissue. Nervous tissue includes two different cell types, neurons and neuroglial cells. It uses electrical impulses to send signals from our brain and spinal cord, so primary messenger system, to different regions of our body so we can respond. So this is a neuron right here, these large structures with the big nucleus in the middle. And then all these tiny little dots outside the neurons, those are neuroglial cells. So neurons send and receive signals, process information, whereas glial cells support, protect the neurons. So there is your nervous tissue, located brain, spinal cord, nerves of the body. I told you the functions already as well. So last thing we're going to talk about, second to last thing, I guess, the body membranes, and then where these body membranes came from. So body membranes are formed from epithelial tissue. They all have underlying connective tissue, areolar connective tissue, associated with them. There are 4 types of body membranes. We have mucous membranes, serous membranes, cutaneous membranes, and synovial membranes. The mucous membrane is a membrane that lines all of the openings to the external environment. So our mouth, our nasal cavity, our the urethra, the vagina, the anus, all have a mucous membrane associated with them. The function of this mucosal membrane is to protect, to trap pathogens, and then move the pathogens away from our organs so that we don't get sick. Okay. Our serous membranes are membranes associated with our movable joints. So our elbow joint, our knee joint, our our shoulder joint, our jaw joint, all of those joints that are movable have a serous membrane associated with them. Oops, it is all